Good morning. We're here to talk about how to preserve your landscape, even in light of this drought. There are a couple of things I want to make everybody aware of. First, we are not going to address questions about desalination plants or dams or any other infrastructure, although it might be highly desirable and we might be very emotional about it. That is not what this panel will be addressing. We will be specifically talking about how we can help you and your plants and your trees get through this with the assets that we have left. So that said, we're going to start off with Jennifer Lancaster from Calleguas Water District.
Hi, thank you. I'm here just to kind of set the stage as far as where we're at with water restrictions and why. And if you were at the previous panel, you heard a lot of this already. So I'll go through it pretty quickly. Next slide. So Calleguas Water District, most people don't know who we are because we're a wholesaler, and so we don't serve the end user, and you might not have heard our name. But about 75% of Ventura County receives all or part of their drinking water from Calleguas. We are a member agency of Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, and we deliver primarily treated imported water from the State Water Project. So again, if you were here for the previous panel, you heard a lot about what is going on the State Water Project. We serve 19 retail agencies and cities in southeastern Ventura County. And we have a 5-member elected board, and we have about 70 employees. Next slide, please. So we are currently in the most severe drought that we've had since we started receiving water from the State Water Project. So we are in the 3rd year of a very dry period, the driest on record. We actually just logged the first 3 months of this year as the driest first 3 months of any year on record. And that's particularly important because here in California, we rely on that period of January through March to accumulate the snowpack that then feeds our reservoirs and serves our water needs throughout the summer, because our summers are always a drought condition in our climate. So not being able to accumulate that water during this time, also being in an extended period of dry climatary conditions, has resulted in the lowest deliveries from the State Water Project that has ever happened since the project was built in the 70s. Next slide, please. So at this point, Metropolitan, who ultimately serves us with our water and then we serve it to our retailers, they have determined that with this cut on the State Water Project, there's not enough water to meet demands, normal demands in the service area. And so substantial reduction in demands is required to get through this period. And so on April 26, Metropolitan's board voted to enact an emergency water conservation program for those areas that are dependent on the State Water Project, such as our area. And the very next day, Calleguas' board, as a wholesaler, adopted that same program and implemented that through to our retail agencies. And compliance with the program began on June 1st. Next slide, please. So the Emergency Water Conservation Program focuses on outdoor water use. And beginning on June 1st, water agencies had to move to a 1-day per week watering restriction with time limits per station, as well as a robust enforcement plan. And the details of the watering restrictions, such as what day of week you're allowed to water, those are going to be determined at the retail agency level. But everyone had to move to 1 day a week watering. Now, the important thing is if we can't meet the conservation goals that we are intending to meet with the 1 day a week watering, the next phase of the Emergency Water Conservation Program is to move to no outdoor watering at all. And that could happen as early as September 1st, depending on the performance of the State Water Project dependent areas over the summer. So at this point, we are really encouraging everyone to prioritize the water you do have for your trees and your high-value plantings in your landscape to keep those alive through this period of water scarcity. Next slide, please. So why are we focusing on outdoor water use? The reason is because it's a substantial proportion of the water that is used in our service area. Especially here in the Conejo Valley and the Simi Valley, it's drier, it's inland, and there's a it's primarily residential, single-family homes with large yards. So there's a lot of water being used outside to keep grass green and landscapes irrigated. So that is the focus of our emergency conservation program right now. And so we are looking at savings of 44 gallons of water per square foot per year when you replace your turf. So as you can see, that adds up a lot. And in fact, Calleguas's water demands have decreased their normal demands by about 20% since before the previous drought in 2014, 2016. And during the previous drought, a lot of folks ripped out their lawns and they put in climate-appropriate landscaping and other things. And so we do attribute some of that reduction in demands to turf replacement programs. But if you drive around the neighborhood, you'll see that there's still more lawns than drought-tolerant landscaping. And so there's still a lot of places where we can reduce. And especially with lawns comes a lot of inefficient irrigation sometimes. A lot of people way overwater their lawns, or their sprinklers come on in the middle of the night and they don't realize that they're watering their driveway just as vigorously as they're watering the grass. So cutting down on that kind of water waste is a painless place to cut water when we're trying to reduce our demands. So thirsty lawns plus inefficient irrigation, those really account for a substantial amount of water use. So next slide, please. So we like to direct everyone to bewaterwise.com. This is a great resource where you can find out all about rebates that are available for you to start saving water at your house. So, of course, you've probably heard of the turf replacement program. In the Calleguas service area, the rebate starts at $3 a square foot that you can get for removing your lawn and replacing it with a sustainable, drought-tolerant landscape. And again, this program has a sustainability and ecosystem approach, and so there are some restrictions to the program, such as there's no artificial turf that you can put into your project, but it is definitely a way to save a lot of water. And you can apply for your rebate right now, get in the queue, get your rebate on hold, and begin the process of transforming your yard, removing your grass, stopping the irrigation. But you can also get an extension. The program's offering an extension right now. So you wait and put your new plants in the fall when the weather is more conducive, when the water availability hopefully is a little better, so that you can get your new plants established. But you can still take advantage of this program right now. You can also get rebates, like you may have heard on the last panel, for weather-based irrigation controllers, as well as if you are in the market for a new washing machine or you need to replace a toilet. Go to this website, check out what the eligible products are, and make sure that the one that you're purchasing is on the list, and you can get a great rebate for that. You can also sign up for free online classes through this website, and it has a wealth of other educational material available to you. So that concludes my presentation.
Anthony?
Okay, so I'm next. Good morning. My name is Annemiek Schilder. I'm the director of the University of California Cooperative Extension Office in Ventura and the Hansen Agricultural Research and Extension Center in Santa Paula. We are the program that runs Farm Advisor, Master Gardener, and 4-H, you may be familiar with already. So I get to talk to you a little bit about climate change and taking a step back to see what has been happening and what is predicted to happen. And so we're just going to look a little bit at what the Earth is experiencing. Next slide, please. So when we talk about climate change, one of the main things we need to take into account is the greenhouse effect. So the Earth is covered by an atmosphere, which is actually a very good thing, because without the atmosphere, we would be a very cold planet. But the atmosphere captures heat or retains heat, with, especially due to gases like carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases. A lot of these are of human origin. Next slide, please. So in the last 100 years or so, we've had an increase in these gases called greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And the temperature has been going up concomitantly. So we had a very good correlation between carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, especially since the start of the industrial era. We've been putting a lot of emissions into the atmosphere, and the Earth on the whole, on average, has been warming. Next slide, please. So when we look at the, maybe on the whole we have raised the temperature 1 degree centigrade globally, but it's not evenly distributed. So as we look at the map of the United States, you can see that some areas have much faster heating, the darker areas, much faster heating than other areas of the United States. And so when we, next slide please, we can also experience that in, for instance, an increase in the frost-free season. So on the west, we've had more than 19 days, or almost between 16 and 19 days of frost-free season compared to the period from 1901 to 1960. And so while the people in Minnesota may be very happy with that, having a longer frost-free season, it is a concern. And it also affects, animals, plants, our environment as well. Next slide, please. So when we also look at precipitation, there have been changes. And obviously, I don't know how well you can actually see this. This is the United States, and in the West, there's become much drier over the last 30 years, comparatively to the eastern United States, where it's been getting wetter on the whole. So this is something that has been a pattern. Most of the climate, as it is changing, as the temperature is increasing, is simply a matter of physics. Gases expand as the temperature rises, and these climate patterns are changing. Sometimes in somewhat unpredicted ways, because there are feedback loops in the climate. Next slide, please. So we would like to also now focus on California. And I don't know if any of you have read the article in the Washington Post not that long ago that said that Ventura County is the fastest warming county in the United States. So it's like, oh man, why did I choose to move here? And how could this be? But anyway, Ventura County, I talked about this 1 degree centigrade on average. Ventura County has warmed by 2.6 degrees and continues to increase. Next slide, please. So I just want to talk a little bit about the Los Angeles Region Climate Report. This came out in 2018. Next slide, please. This report covers the area, the greater Los Angeles area, including Ventura County. Next slide, please. And so they're talking about what are the key projected climate changes in this region in the next half century to the end of the century. So they say that the average maximum temperature will continue to increase to about 4 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-century and 5 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit by late century. So basically, if we're doing nothing, if nothing changes, the temperatures will continue to increase. They also say the number of extremely hot days will increase, as well as the hottest day of the year could be up to 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than we're used to by late century. And also, while the average amount of precipitation may not change much, they're talking about much more extreme rainfall events. So maybe you'll have, instead of, let's say, 8 rainfall events, you might have 4, but they will be much more heavy, which unfortunately, results in a lot of runoff versus infiltration of water into the ground. A lot of it will run off through the rivers into the ocean. Next slide, please. They also suggest that sea levels are predicted to rise 1 to 2 feet by mid-century and up to 8 to 10 feet by the end of the century, although that is by the most extreme models. So they're modeling based on physical processes, and so the extreme models say that much rise is what we could experience in this region. Also, wildfires are expected to increase, not surprisingly, although they said the size of the burned area will be difficult to predict. I mean, that is a very unpredictable thing. The other thing I want to point out is that each 1 degree, it doesn't seem that much, a 1 degree rise in temperature. It's not additive. It's like it could roughly double the risk of extreme weather events. So, maybe 1 degree instead of, 2 events, we might have 4. Add 1 more degree to that, we might have 8 events. So it's not linear, so to speak. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. So what we might experience then on the ground around us is that we have, these extreme heat events, and the picture on the top left from your angle is actually that was a 116-degree day in Ojai in 2019, and a lot of the avocado trees got burned up. A lot of the branches died because of that. We talked about drought stress. That is obviously something we're experiencing already. We could also have high winds. It seems like we have more Santa Ana winds, and so we lose crops because of that through the wind damage. And I should also like to point out that our farm workers who harvest our food, there are more heat stress risk to them, and also to you if you're working in the garden, obviously. So that's also a risk. Farm workers are much more likely to die of heat-related injury than the average person. So next slide, please. Some more, maybe subtle effects could be that there's insufficient till hours, that some of your plants that need so much chilling in the winter will not fruit properly. Your flowering time may be off, and that's, maybe we don't mind, but the bees will mind and the other pollinators. We could also have invasive pest outbreaks, insects that, especially insects multiply rapidly when the weather is warm. We could have outbreaks of those, as well as diseases due to these different climatic events. Next slide, please. So I guess the question is, what can we do at this point? I know it sounds like a very doom and gloom story. I know we can still do things. Obviously, reducing greenhouse gas emissions is the main thing that we need to reduce worldwide. And especially, Americans are the highest per capita producers of emissions. Also, we reducing heat islands. You heard them speak about that, having more trees in urban areas to have shading, which is a little bit of a problem because now we can't water the trees. So how are we going to keep and even add trees to urban areas and keep them alive? And also these trees are needed to increase carbon dioxide, carbon storage. You may have heard of that, carbon sequestration. We need actually more plants and more organic matter in the soil to capture that carbon and to store it. And then just increasing resilience to climate change. And that's why today we're learning about ways in which we can be resilient, in which we can adapt to climate change. But I think awareness is a big part of this, and I think this event today is a wonderful way of learning what we can do to adapt to climate change and moderate the effects. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jim Downer. I work for the University of California Cooperative Extension as the Landscape Horticulture Advisor. Today, I'd like to share with you some tips on how to save your trees from drought. As you can see from the U.S. Drought Monitor map, we are already in drought, and this severe drought will probably spread as our summer months continue on. Some trees are very well adapted to surviving drought, like these oaks in the Arizona savanna, while we see trees here in my own town of Ojai that have died due to drought. And this all has to do with making poor selections and then not maintaining the trees properly after they were planted initially. So I'd like to give you a little primer on how trees move water. And this happens through the soil, plant, air continuum. This is a technical page, I realize, but it shows a tree in a cartoon, and it shows water entering the roots from the soil, being taken up through the wood, and each molecule of water is connected to another molecule by hydrogen bonds. And they're literally pulled out of the tree into the atmosphere by this gradient of water potentials, which gets more and more negative as the water moves toward the canopy. This process is called transpiration, and it's vital for trees to cool them. Without transpiration, trees die. And without this continuous chain of water molecules, water cannot move and trees will again die. So we need to maintain this, and there are some ways that we can do this during drought. One thing to realize, and really very important, is that we live in a Mediterranean climate, and our water comes at the wet times in January and November, December, but during the spring and the summer months and the fall months, we get very little, if any, rainfall. And these are the months when the temperatures are the greatest and the days are the longest. The more sunlight we have, the more water use that plants in our gardens have. And so drought typically builds throughout the spring and summer. And along with drought, stress in the tree builds throughout the year. Stress reaches its maximum right before rain in the fall, late fall. If we haven't applied water by then, trees will be at the highest risk of perishing from drought. So it's really important to be mindful that stress builds through the summer, during the dry months, and that at some point we can interrupt that by applying a strategic irrigation. And just one irrigation is enough to take stress off of trees and allow them to survive a long dry period in the summer. The other way we can attain this, and this is really very critical, is to cover the soil with mulch. Mulch is very, very helpful to trees on many levels. And typically I give, for my master gardeners, a 3-hour presentation on just mulch because it's so important. But the key thing is that arborist mulch, which is provided by tree trimmers, is the best mulch you can put down around your woody plants, your trees and shrubs, to prevent water from evaporating from the soil surface. In time, this mulch breaks down and it is incorporated in the soil underlying it, and it changes the texture, the water holding ability of the soil, and the ability of the soil to take water in. Mulch is also helpful because it slows down the movement of water over soil, and it gives the soil more time to absorb water when it does rain or when it is irrigated. Furthermore, mulch prevents weeds from germinating, and it keeps them from using water that your intended tree or shrub would otherwise get. So mulch has a variety of functions, and because it's made of trees and plants, the minerals that are in the mulch slowly move into soil, so you do not need to fertilize your landscape if it is mulched. Generally speaking, with newly planted trees, we can skip about every other irrigation if a tree is mulched and it's in full sun. So mulching really helps to save water and is critical to help trees survive drought. So for your action items, some important things to do and remember: don't plant new trees in the summer. This newly planted tree requires frequent irrigation. So if we're going to plant a tree, plant it in the fall when we're going into the time of the year when it's going to rain. Don't plant thirsty species such as alder, birch, willow, and maple, liquid amber, The picture in the slide here is a liquid amber that has died, as was the picture on the first slide. So these are species that are not adapted to our county and our climate and lack of water. They occur in our landscapes because we have irrigated them. Sometimes they're grown in turf grass, which is heavily irrigated, but we can't afford to irrigate any longer. So we need to plant climate-ready trees, or trees that can tolerate hot climates and survive long periods of drought. Sometimes these are native species, such as the coast live oak or other oaks, the valley oak, and some other trees like that. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're species that we get from other Mediterranean climates throughout the world that grow very well here during our dry period. Keep in mind that because a tree is native doesn't mean that it's drought tolerant. White alder is native to our mountains right here in Ventura County, but it's not drought tolerant. It wants to grow in a creek. Make sure your trees are mulched and apply as much mulch as you can under the drip line to cover the soil around that tree, out past the drip line if possible. Remove competing landscape plants, and sometimes even trees need to be removed if there are too many in a landscape, so that the intended specimens can remain and they have more water to consume and survive. They're not competing with one another. Reduce the stress on your trees in midsummer with a soaking irrigation. Make sure that the irrigation goes down at least 12 inches, and you can test this with a screwdriver. Plunge the screwdriver into the soil. If it goes down 12 inches, that's how far your water went from your irrigation. You can do this with a gentle soaking from the end of a hose or a sprinkler that applies water slowly. And generally, if your trees are mulched, there will be no runoff. Don't prune your trees in summer. Pruning is stressful. The pruning wounds lose moisture and also lead to disruption of those water molecules in the tree and will further exacerbate the effects of drought. Do not fertilize your trees during the drought, because fertilizers add salt to the soil water that makes it harder for the plants to get water. And finally, if you have the ability to, plant adapted trees in the fall. This is the time for tree planting because we're going into the rainy period. If you have further questions or other questions, you can reach me at ajdowner@ucanr.edu. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to talking to you in the future.
Okay, hi, my name is Danny Brucius. I'm a master gardener. I've been a master gardener since 2005. My specialty is research, so I do a lot of research on the helpline. If you contact us on the helpline, you might get in touch with me. So anyway, I'm going to go a little bit off here from the other stuff. I'm going to talk about native plants. Is that okay? So you probably have 3 different kinds of plants in your yard. They're natives, exotics, and invasives. And I'm going to start with invasives. Invasive plants are, they crowd out the natives in our wildlands. They increase the intensity and the frequency of fires. So I've got a little bit here on fires. When you increase the frequency of fires, what happens is sometimes it crowds out the native plants don't come back. Some native plants require fire to bloom again, to germinate, but if we have too frequent of fires, a lot of the time the seeds aren't viable by that time, so we're actually losing species. Let's see, exotics. Exotics those are the introduced plants that you have. And some of them might not, if they're not from a Mediterranean climate, they might not be, you might have to use more water to keep them alive. You need to work with them. My big beef with exotics is a lot of them don't attract the bugs our little native bugs. And you might think, well, that's a good thing, no bugs. But if you don't have bugs, you don't have birds. And on to the natives. Okay, so there's thousands of choices. We have plants here that you can find nowhere else on the earth. There's tons and tons of plants. The natives have evolved over time, and it creates a balance. So our wildlife, the pollinators, the birds, they all know, the little birds know, to go to this kind of grass for seeds and stuff like that. So it all works together. Native plants conserve water. And as Jim said, not all natives are drought tolerant, so you have to kind of watch for that. They're low maintenance. They're not no maintenance because especially in fire areas, you have to be careful with keeping the deadwood cut out and any leaf litter. Let's see, they don't require chemicals, okay? Your native plants, they don't even like fertilizer. So that's a good one. They have a low carbon footprint, because if you figure that you don't have the gardener coming once a week and using the mower and the blower and putting the chemicals on your lawns, it's a lower carbon footprint for these. So if you're choosing natives, make sure you try and get as close to your plant community. We're a chaparral community here. And it's a big state. We've got everything from the Sierras to the coast. So the things that are going to do better are the ones that are closer to your plant community. The next thing is fire. So know that all plants can burn. So when you're choosing your plants, you want to choose the plants with more watery tissue. You want to stay away from plants with sticky or gummy sap. They're more prone to fire. And chaparral plants are adapted to fire. And you're saying, well, you're telling me to plant these things that are adapted to fire that are going to burn in my yard? And no, what you want to do, you want to follow what CAL FIRE recommends. Keep your plants separate, don't bunch them all together. That's why in the chaparral it burns hot, it burns fast, because the plants are all bunched together. You might want to use little islands in your landscape with things that won't burn in between. CAL FIRE now recommends no plants within the first 5 feet of your structure. So that's another thing with fire. Oh, some plants are passive pyrophytes. So those are plants that very rarely burn, and that probably has nothing to do with your landscape or getting rid of your yard, because those are usually the big, huge trees with thick bark and the really high canopies. But I'm including that because I just learned that word 3 days ago, and I thought I'd stick it in here. Okay, so we did learn some things from the Thomas Fire and from the Woolsey Fire, is that we do have native plants that some of them filtered out the firebrands. So before you go planting, it was like some of the native oaks, and ceanothus was one that did good. But before you go planting rows of these things, it's nothing that's proven yet. And CAL FIRE is still telling you to keep a good distance between your trees, so don't plant rows. There's difference between old and young plants in the native plants too. For instance, the elderberry, the Sambucus, I believe it's the Sambucus mexicana. It's either a shrub or a tree, and it's the one with the flat yellow flowers on it that you see in the open lands. That one is very fire resistant when it's young, but when it gets old, it's very fire prone. So I do have one of those in my yard. It's a volunteer, and it's nothing that I planted, but I cut it back every year, and every year it grows, and it gets the new soft growth, and it doesn't get woody. Another one is deer grass. Deer grass is real popular. It's very flammable. I have deer grass. I cut it back every year. In September, I cut it back, and it comes back green, and it never gets that brown, crispy look, so it's not really fire prone. And the next thing is water, and that's basically what everybody's here for. So what I'm saying is everybody else brought up now, do not plant now. Now is not the time to plant. Now is the time to take out your lawn and figure out your design and put in your irrigation. And note that your plants are not drought tolerant until they're established. So I see a lot of people out there, they freaked out when they saw that, you know, oh, we've got water restrictions, we're gonna go drought tolerant, and they're putting in these drought tolerant gardens, but those plants are not gonna be drought tolerant until they're established. And what established is when the roots grow into the native soil and the plant starts to grow, that's established. And you're gonna use a lot more water establishing your plants, so that's why you wanna plant in the fall. Some plants don't like summer water. That's perfect. You know, if you can get plants that don't like to be watered during the summer, one of them is ceanothus, and I'm selling ceanothus here, aren't I? Out of my trunk, just kidding. But ceanothus, it was a plant that did fairly good in the fires. It's a plant that was used in the landscape a lot, and we shied away from it because the landscaper said, well, it's not a very long-lived plant. The reason it wasn't a long-lived plant is because we put it on our irrigation systems and we were watering it 3 times a day. It doesn't like summer water. But no, if you have these plants that are drought tolerant, and we are still in a drought, because we are in a Mediterranean climate, and that's like 2% of the entire planet, so we're really special here. Know that if we're in a drought, we're not getting rain in the winter months, you're gonna have to water those plants to keep them healthy in the winter. So some tips are to pick slow growers. Slow growers are the enduring plants. And you may not like that they don't fill in real fast, like as fast as you'd like them to, but they're the enduring plants, and over time they will get better and better, and those are the plants that you're going to cherish in your yard. Pull weeds, as Jim mentioned, they may be using water that's intended for your plants, and don't fertilize. And that's all I have.
My name's Kathleen. I'm also a master gardener. I happen to be the one that teaches the drip irrigation, and we are sponsored by Callegas. Not everybody knows we have a class out there at least once a month that is completely free, that you can come to and learn about drip irrigation. We even have you build a system so that you can actually see how it all goes together. And we have it once, twice a month, sometimes 3 times a month. You can go online and sign up for it. I was just there this morning. You can take the class as many times as you need to feel comfortable. We pretty much do a pretty good job getting people out there and putting a system together. It's pretty easy to do. Something as simple as this. You got water coming from someplace. You got a hose bib. You got sprinklers. Well, some people don't want to look at their sprinklers and say, okay, I'm going to turn this into drip irrigation. It's a huge investment when you've got your PVC sprinklers and it's all in your controller and it makes life really easy. The thing is, those regular sprinklers throw water out there at gallons per minute. Drip irrigation is gallons per hour. At the end of this month, in the city of Thousand Oaks, you will not be allowed to use one of those regular old-fashioned sprinklers. You have to switch to low flow or you can't use them. We can get rebates on them, it's okay. But the biggest thing is drip irrigation is uniquely qualified to help us get through this drought. And the cool thing is your investment in time right now will really pay dividends going forward. Everybody's talking about weeds, and we don't want to have the weeds around because they will compete for the water. One of the best things about drip irrigation, if you're not throwing water there, there's no weeds, okay? I hate weeding. I'm terminally lazy. It takes less time to install one of these basic systems than it does for you to go out and water those plants by hand. It's not that difficult to do. We can show you how. Next slide, please. One of the things you do need to know, next slide. Okay. One of the things you need to know, is it going? There we go. All right. What kind of soil you have. If you're here from Ventura County or from Oxnard, you've got sandy soil. So you can imagine that hourglass and all the sands going straight through it, relatively quickly. That's sort of how water is going to go through your soil. You want to know this because for you, watering a little more frequently and putting your emitters closer together is what you're going to need to do. If you're from Thousand Oaks and Simi Valley, we've got that clay soil, you know, you dig into it and it's really hard and everything else. Thank your lucky stars. In a drought, clay soil is your friend. It holds water. But you don't want to go and just pour a bunch of water on it because it's going to do exactly what that picture says on the right. It's going to go sideways, and if you're doing it too quickly, it's going to go off down the street and the water police are going to come and get you. Okay, but drip irrigation, it goes in low and slow. And you can get that water to go first a little sideways and then down, and then it's going to hang on to it. Drought, drip irrigation, and clay soil, you got it made. Okay? Next slide, please. There's a couple of tools that we have. Jim talked about putting a screwdriver down into your soil to see how deep your water goes. Because you can stand there with a hose, and you can water until you're kind of bored. And then if you take your foot and kind of scuff it, you're going to find out you've got like this much mud and the rest of it's totally dry. I have a very short attention span, so that means even less. You really need to put that water in low and slow. And because it takes gallons per hour as opposed to gallons per minute, the water purveyors know this, and it's okay to go over the 15 minutes with your drip irrigation system, because they know that that water is going in at a much slower rate. So you will need to adjust your system to that. And then you look at it and you go, okay, well, how do I know how much water is down in there? One of the ways you can stick your finger in the soil and see how wet it is, my finger's really short, okay? But this thing's really long, okay? Most people have seen these. You take them in, you use them in your house plants, you stick it in the house plant. Take it outside. Take it on a field trip. You can water your orange tree and stick this in and find out how much water is in there, okay? It's a very easy thing to do. I have several of them outside. The best thing is, especially when we're all learning about all of this, is things like citrus trees, you know, their leaves kind of fold up and then they kind of droop and you're like, oh, it needs more water. It might not. It kind of does the same thing when you overwater it. This is a lot smarter than me, okay? So this will help you learn the signs. But the best thing is as you're going out, you're also learning how effective your irrigation is. This makes things a lot easier, and it's a simple thing to do. So this, combined with the smartest controller we hope we have, you can give your plants what they need, even with drought restrictions. Jim talked about getting your trees through on that one interrupting deep irrigation. It does work. Your rose bushes will make it, okay? They can make it on that amount of irrigation every couple of weeks. If they're mulched, don't fertilize them. No, your babies won't have all the big pretty flowers on them this year, I'm sorry. But they will stay alive. If you add fertilizer and stress them and they start putting out all of those flowers, that's going to use up their resources. So you want to make sure to keep that in mind with your irrigation as well. You don't want to push a lot of new growth. You want to keep them alive. And yes, we can do it. Can we do it with our lawns? Really? It's a battle that's just not worth fighting. I'm sorry, I like a green lawn. There are certain lawns that can make it. If you've got kikuyu, you know, there's things like carapia, things like that you can put in that take effort and still take water. But for right now, a big bag of grass seed is not that expensive. Just take the water away from the lawns, put it into your high-value trees and shrubs. You can keep them alive. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? For drip irrigation, which is my thing, it's pretty basic. You know, you want to get the water from wherever it is you're starting from to wherever it is you want it to go. And we do that through just a series of tubes, polytube. It's a very simple, very inexpensive thing to use. There's a few basic things to understand in terms of how they're put together, but it is really not difficult to do. The next thing is, once you get the water there, how are you going to get it out? Well, we can get it out in any way you want. There's all these wonderful little emitters, and you might walk into the store and kind of go, oh my gosh, there's all of this stuff here. But once you understand the basics of it, it goes from being intimidating to being a toy store. They've got little emitters. You can set it up to where it's misting your ferns or giving your little hummingbird buddies a little shower. You can keep the humidity up in your greenhouse. You can have it, you know, trail down off your chains in your pergola and take care of your hanging plants while you're on vacation. And you can run all of this off of the same system. and you can still put a controller on it. They make timers for hose bibs. This one costs about $45, $50. It runs on a battery. You change the battery twice a year. But I can program this to run however long I want on what days of the week that I want. They make them that are electrical. You can wire them in if you're so inclined. I'm lazy. They also make them in solar, which works really, really well, but I'm cheap and lazy. So this one works fine for me. You attach it to your hose. There's a few other parts that we will teach you how to attach that has to do with controlling the pressure through a drip system. If you don't control the pressure, the little emitters are going to blow off and you're going to have little spouts going off all over the place. We control the pressure. We put a filter on it to keep any little particles out. And then after that, there's just this wonderful array of emitters that you can choose from. There's simple things. You can get something like this. Stuff's getting easier all the time. It's cool. It's got all the emitters are in here. You take this, you put this around your plant like that, you plug it into the poly tube, cover it with mulch, you're good to go. You don't have to think about it anymore. So it's become easier and easier to install these types of systems and less expensive. And if you think, okay, well, if I hook up my hose to a drip system, how do I still use my hose? They make things for that too, okay? I like to change my mind. I like to do lots of things at once. This is something that they call a manifold. I teach in class. Manifold just means from one pipe to many, okay? It's not big, huge repairs. They cost a couple bucks. You can get these as big and convoluted as you want. You can get it for 2. You can split it into 4. You can split it into 12. It's up to you how far you want to take it. But the bottom line is it's a simple and very affordable way to control the water that's going out to your system. And you can take those existing sprinklers, cap off most of them, and they make wonderful little all-in-one things now. You unscrew the sprinkler, you screw the new thing on that includes that pressure reducer and that filter. You can attach the tubing to it. You run it out to your plants. You put a couple little pokey things in so that it'll release the water. It's that easy. It will take an afternoon to go, pick up the parts and then stand there and tell somebody to do it or make your kids do it. I like using minions, but it is very easy to put together, and we have people that we teach all the time to do this, okay? Very cost-effective, very reasonable thing to do. May I have the next one, please? Okay, these are some of the systems that I talked about. You can take it from that typical sprinkler can riser on the upper right. These things over here are sort of like one-and-done kits. You screw the sprinkler can out, you screw the new drip irrigation thing in. It sends it out in 2 different directions. You put your tubing on one side, tubing on the other, and you're ready to go. And it's hooked into your original control system, so you can still use your programmable controller. If you're doing it from the hose bib, again, you can get one of these. Can I have the next slide, please? The bottom line, though, I don't care what system you use, as long as the appropriate amount of water gets to where it needs to go. If you've got new plantings or something that you're worried about, let me introduce you to something new, okay? This is called a jug. I use an old vinegar jug just because I like it. Costco size, isn't that cool? I took this jug, I would take a heated up ice pick, poke 2 holes in it, fill it up with water, put the cap on, I do turn it upside down, walk out to the tree, go like that, and I walk away. I did have to write, please don't remove on it, because I had a neighbor that was concerned somebody was leaving trash in my front yard. I just put this up next to the plant, and it slowly drips in. I didn't have to run anything other than my sorry little hiney out there to the tree and put that down. I now have a very effective drip irrigation system. It doesn't have to be something big. It doesn't have to be something expensive. I can do this, put it out there on the tree that's on my parkway that has no other irrigation going to it, and my tree will be just fine. Once or twice on that, every couple of weeks. I've got one that's a Hong Kong orchid that's been in for about 9 months, and it's blooming and it's doing just fine. Okay, you can do this with a rose bush. You can do it with whatever you need to do it with. Or you can buy the fancy one. They make these little tree-hugging bags. Many people have seen them where they're kind of hug on the parkway trees. It's sort of green, and you fill it up, and it just slowly leaches water out. If you want to go the fancy way, you can do that too. But the bottom line is just get the right amount of water to get through this. So when you take your showers and you're catching your water in your bucket, there's your delivery system, okay? There's lots of ways that you can do it. It doesn't have to be expensive. It does not have to be big, but you can find a way to get through this. Okay. All right, I think we're ready to open up for questions. Do we have Jim on the line? Okay.
We do not yet,
Thank you.
but we have some questions.
We've got two people here, so why don't we start with them, and then we'll switch back onto the web, please? Okay.
Okay.
Hello. Oh, is it on? Oh, I can't hear. Hello. I like to grow food, grapes, pomegranates, stuff like that. What are the best kinds of food trees, or fruit trees, or that are drought tolerant? I think pomegranates are considered, but is there anything else that I could consider planting in the fall that would give me fruits or other things?
There we go. Okay, once the trees are established, they do very well. Pomegranates are wonderful for something like that, but I have apple trees that are suited to our area in terms of chill hours. I'm not trying to grow, something exotic. I'm growing trees that can get by on very few cool hours. And those do very well with being watered intermittently. Not all trees require a lot of water. Citrus actually don't require a lot of water. I think Jim would probably have the best suggestions for us.
Okay, restate the question.
The best drought-tolerant fruit-producing trees.
Oh, really good question. Glad you asked. Probably the Persian mulberry.
Ooh, yum.
Persian mulberry is in the Moraceae, the fig family, and they're extremely drought tolerant. But there's a lot of drought tolerance also in prunus, in particularly apricots. Apricots are grown dry land in Ventura County. They're grown in Upper Ojai without any water at all. No applied water, period.
Nice.
And so apricots, also pomegranates. Drought tolerant orchard. And if it's mulched, you wouldn't need to water much any of it.
There you go. Okay.
Hi. When I purchased our home 15 years ago, it has 4 enormous redwood trees. It has 9 birch trees. It has 2 liquid ambers. It has 25 trees.
Wow.
And they're all mature, and we have a Chinese elm that the canopy is almost the width of this room, no lie. It is stunning. So my question is, it's my understanding that the root system of trees like this are as long as the height of these trees. So these trees go right onto my grass. And first of all, we don't want to kill them because the wildlife depends on these trees, and so does the planet for oxygen. So I don't know the man's name who's on the phone. I don't.
Dr. Jim Downer.
Downer, because I'd like D-O-N-N-E-R.
D-O-W-N-E-R.
N-E-R, okay. I don't want them to die, obviously, and I can't afford to have them cut out, and I can't afford to replace them. It would be tens of thousands of dollars. These are mature, huge trees. He said to water them, to irrigate them, and I'm going to have a company out because I have hundreds of shrubs. I have gorgeous property. I'm going to have every single shrub with a drip system. I'm hoping, my fingers crossed. It's going to cost thousands of dollars. I'm willing to do this. But my question is, Mr. Downer or Dr. Downer said to irrigate it during the summer for a lengthy period of time. Is that what he said? And if so, how long? I don't know what to do.
Jim?
The audio kind of cuts in and out. I think I got most of the question. Obviously, everybody's landscape is unique.
Yes.
And what you personally need to do is to saturate the root zone of the trees you intend to keep. The other thing is you should mulch. If you haven't mulched the root zones of the trees, they should be mulched. And you can start that right now. You can water through the mulch, and you can selectively remove trees that are less important than others. But the thing you should realize, you mentioned a number of trees. A lot of those are heavy water using, the redwoods and such. And you mentioned that they're old. Well, as trees grow larger, they use more water. Trees, when they're first planted, use very little water. Trees, when they mature, use a lot of water. And as they get larger and larger, they use more and more water. So If trees have been reliant on your lawn for their water, and that's where they're getting it, and you're going to turn off the water on the lawn, then the trees are going to suffer. And they'll start to show symptoms of drought. They'll start to lose leaves early. They'll start to die back. Some may die entirely. The bleeding on the trunk where bark boring insects have occurred, or other pests have attacked the tree. So the first thing is recognize when the trees are becoming stressed. Recognize when they're wilting, when the leaves are turning yellow, when you're getting dieback. Those are all indications of stress. And if that happens, that's your signal to apply some stress relief in the name of water. But if nothing is stressed, if everything looks okay, then you can just go along without watering. And trees and landscapes can often go the whole summer with no applied water. So the other thing is that many trees are adapted to take care of drought on their own. So they will just lose leaves, and not in an unhealthy way, they'll just let them go, and they'll go summer dormant. So your Chinese elm and many of the ash trees, such as evergreen ash or Mexican ash, they just defoliate, and they wait till water's available in the fall, and then they come back. So you have to know a little bit about the biology of your tree. You have to know your property. You have to know the soil. There's a lot of things to know. And you have to be able to monitor for drought stress. Don't get too excited about it yet. As I indicated in my presentation, drought stress really peaks out around the end of August going into September. That's when you're really going to see it. So if you need more help on this, there are publications I can refer you to, and or we could have private discussions on, as per my email, which I'll put in the chat on Zoom. But it was also in my talk, and also our Master Gardener helpline is there to help you with guidance. And I see that it's on the screen right now. So that's kind of a long answer, but it's also a very qualified answer, because every single landscape is different, and that everybody's needs are different.
Right.
Thank you. Okay, I have a question for Danny. Arborist chips don't seem like a good idea for protecting a house from wildfires. Please comment.
Okay, so CAL FIRE recommends that you don't put anything that will burn within 5 feet of the structure. So what I did have chips up to the house. I replaced them with rocks. And you can get rocks, they won't break down and add nutrients to your plants, but they will protect the soil, and they'll save some water too. So within the 5 feet by your structure, I would definitely think about using some kind of rocks. If you use the small ones, you're going to have to, like gravel size, you're going to have to put a weed barrier underneath them. But I use I guess, egg-size rocks under mine, and I did not put down a weed barrier, and I have had no problem with it, except for there was one area where there were bulbs and the raccoons came and tore it up. But besides that, yeah, you can always use rocks, gravel, things like that.
Okay, another question. Is bark a possible substitute for mulch?
Yes.
Yes, but mulch is anything that you put on top of, or bark,
Bark is mulch if used on top.
everything, yeah. Mulch is anything you put on top. It could be pine needles, it could be rocks, it could be gravel, anything you put on top of the soil is, and stay away from the fine mulch. The bigger mulches are the best, because while the fine mulch looks really pretty, sometimes it mats and it doesn't let the water infiltrate. And you want a good, you want water and air exchange underneath the mulch. So the, at least medium-sized bark chips are the best, or bigger.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, I'll wait.
I actually have two questions, so I don't know if I'm allowed to do that. The first question is, are there any diseases we need to be aware of that the drought will exacerbate? And the other question is, if we do drip irrigation and we're allowed to do longer than our allotted 5 minutes per LA county, how do we tell the county that it's okay?
I'll do the drip one first and then have Jim do the other. With drip irrigation, most water meters are digitally monitored now. They know how much water you're using, they know when, and they can see the patterns. They will know because of the volume reduction going out, that it's going out to a drip system. And as long as you can prove, you know, if they come to look, it's like, this is clearly drip. So they will be okay with it. If something shows up, then you do need to explain. If it's a situation where you're using a lot more water than you've ever used before, because now you've got drip systems like running under your grass and everything else, come on, be real. Some people are going to try that. Please don't do that to us. But they will know that it's a drip system based upon the volume that's going out.
And then argue with your neighbors to say, it's okay, I got permission.
Well, yeah, sometimes it requires some explanation, but you can show your neighbor also that this is a drip system and it requires being run over this time. And you can hand them back the water company's paperwork and say it very clearly shows this. So, but even with drip, make sure it's not, you know, running off onto the sidewalk. Drip systems can have problems. You do have to maintain them. If something's gone wrong, you need to find out if there's a little waterfall, the same way you do with a regular sprinkler system. Make sure you're keeping an eye on it, that something hasn't gone wrong and you're not shooting water down the gutter or anything like that. But yeah, the drip system can be run longer. And I know there's a lot of talk of, you know, people running their sprinklers for 5 minutes 3 times a week as opposed to 15 minutes 1 time a week. You're actually better off all at once. The rest of it, you can do a lot of evaporation. So you're actually better off allowing that water to go in slowly. But if you're going to use your regular sprinkler, switch to something called pulse, which just means run your sprinklers for like 2 minutes and let the water sink in, then come back in 2-3 minutes, come back in 2-3 minutes. That's your best way to avoid runoff. So if you're still going to use regular sprinklers, switch to that. But you shouldn't have any issues if you're using drip irrigation.
I have one comment. I'm lucky enough to, I have Triumpho is my water district, and we can actually go in online and you can look hourly at what your water use is. And the day that I run my sprinklers, it goes way up, and they can tell. They know.
And I just want to add that the Emergency Water Conservation Program is targeted toward traditional sprinkler systems, and that drip irrigation and hand watering, those are not the target of the 1 day a week watering, because we as water districts understand that you do irrigate in a very different manner when you're using drip. And so, yeah, so I wouldn't worry about that if you have a drip system. Go ahead and continue to run it the way it most efficiently works in your yard. If you're watering by hand, that's fine. If you're using traditional overhead spray sprinklers, that's where you need to stick to your 1 day a week. And yes, if you want to break it up into smaller pieces, say you're allowed 10 minutes, you get to break it up 2 minutes, wait 2 minutes. As long as it's on your allotted day, that's fine. But that means don't water for a couple minutes on Monday and then again on Wednesday. So it has to all be on that same day.
And to second that, that's what I was referring to. Watering it for a couple of minutes over several days is not efficient. You're going to have just a lot of evaporation. It's not going to get down into the soil to feed those roots. So please don't think that watering, you know, rather than taking your 15 minutes and going 5 and 5 and 5 on 3 different days, that's not the better way to go. You really want to get that water down into the soil to the roots where it's going to do its best job. Okay.
The other question that she had about diseases.
Oh, the diseases. You want to go for it?
I can go, or Jim? It's yours. Okay, I guess it's me. So the question was whether some diseases could become worse. And yes, there is a pathogen of trees that is often found in many trees. Butyrosphaeria, it may already be in the tree, and it only expresses itself when the tree is stressed. So you could have some dieback on branches that is caused by a fungus that basically preys on the plant when it's stressed. So, for control of that, it's best to prune it out, and, try to, again, help the tree by not letting it get too stressed. Thank you for the question.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, hopefully this will be a quick question. You said skip the fertilizer, but I wanted to know what your thoughts were on adding silica, and if it's worth it to use, how often for trees and high-value plants?
What's your reasoning for adding silica?
Because it's supposed to be good for stress, like to reduce stress and help with water mode transport? No? Is it not worth it?
Yeah, I have heard of that. Maybe strengthening plant cell walls and such, but I'm not really sure as far as, when to apply, how much. I would need to look back to see if there was some research that was done on that, so.
So it's probably better just to skip it at this point, or?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I've been looking for a landscaper or a landscape designer to be able to replace what we currently have. And my usually successful Google search has not been very helpful. Is there anywhere you can point to say these are the people that are the type of designers, or is there a certification maybe that we should look for? Thanks.
We look for certifications, but we can't advocate anybody. I'm sorry, we're not able to provide that endorsement. You do want somebody that's licensed, that's certified. Definitely look for referrals. You want somebody that's licensed, bonded, and insured. It may seem like it's a little more money, but you really want someone to know what they're doing. And then the next thing is, don't do it right now. There's a strong chance that we could have no outdoor irrigation at all. And that's a huge investment in time, money, labor. Wait.
And I've seen there's a lot of new designers out there that are doing crazy things. They're like removing soil, and they're bringing in all kinds of different things into your yard. Make sure that you get referrals and people that are happy with their work, because there's gonna, every time something like this happens, you get people that come in that don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah, they just want to kind of sort of take advantage of everybody's anxiety and say we can fix the problem. And sometimes the best way to fix the problem is just not do anything. Just be patient, keep your trees and your shrubs alive, and then...
And keep your soil.
Yeah, keep your soil. Don't give your soil away. Yes?
Hi, excuse me. I have a zoysia lawn, which I've had it for 35 years, I would guess. It's very well established. And my gardener planted it because it was drought resistant. So I do use, a regular sprinkler system because it's thick, it's 6 inches thick at least. Is there a better way to water that, or?
With what you already have, and in order to keep that lawn alive, you can stick with what you have, switch to the pulse process, it's where you're watering a little bit at a time, allowing that surface tension. Dry soil tends to be what they call hydrophobic. It really kind of doesn't, it has to kind of adapt to having the moisture sink in. So by spreading it out, you're more likely to have it sink in. It's not going to look great. I mean, that's one thing. Everybody's lawn's going to be kind of brown and a little crispy, but it should make it. One of the things that we do know is with the restriction, I don't know if all of the districts have the restriction. If you're in Thousand Oaks, you can't use regular overhead sprinklers anymore as of the end of July. You need to switch to the low flow, I think it's a low flow rotary sprinkler to have available. They just change out the heads on them, and then you can continue to use it. But now it's a low volume, which is sort of like drip, and you're allowed to go a little longer because it's going to spray that water out a little slower, which means it's going to absorb better. So there's some good changes that can come from this. You're going to be making changes that'll be good going forward for a long time, and there's a lot of financial support for it. So switch to those, and then you can continue to keep it going. But be aware it's going to suffer, but it should make it.
Yeah, it bounces back pretty well, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I just add regarding the low flow, that is a City of Thousand Oaks requirement, so that is not at the, regional level. And so if you live in the City of Thousand Oaks, I highly recommend you go to toakswater.org, their water page, so you can get those details, because I can't say for certain that the rotary sprinklers will be allowed under those new conditions. So before you spend any money, make sure you understand exactly what is going to be required in your city. And if you don't live in the City of Thousand Oaks, then that might not be a requirement that's going to come your way.
I do know that Thousand Oaks, it's the end of this month, you can't use the traditional overhead sprinklers.
And I do have one other question. Obviously, they don't want any lawns at all anymore, and front lawn.
That's not the case.
Well, I feel like we're kind of low-hanging fruit. Are they doing anything to monitor and see how many people actually have their swimming pools covered?
I don't know. We're just sort of speaking to how to preserve the landscape. That was the panel before us. But you will be surprised. You can let your grass go, and a lot of it's going to come back. If you have kikuyu, it's going to come back. That stuff is hard to kill. So there's ways to get through this, and that's what we're here for, is to just help you get through. Do we have?
And there's options too, because we took out our lawn in 2008 and put in a meadow.
Yeah.
And the meadow's amazing in the spring. It's doesn't look as perfect in the middle of the summer, but it always comes back, and it's a meadow. Yeah, it's various grasses and stuff. Yeah,
Way less
and
maintenance.
lots of flowers.
Way less maintenance. Do we have more up, Nicole?
We do. This person has several trees, citrus trees, with root zones as large as 20 feet in diameter. What kind of irrigation system should they use?
Whatever works. Mulch, not right next to the trunk. We advise lots of mulch. Please don't put mulch right up next to a trunk ever. Not a little trunk, not a big trunk. No. Everywhere else, lots of mulch. If they can put drip underneath the mulch, that's ideal right now because it's the least amount of evaporation. But if all they have is traditional, then you work with what you got. But you can do with something as simple as, take what's called an embedded emitter line. They make this, it's like a hose with little pressure-controlled emitters going all the way through it. And they can run it in a circle around or concentric circles. If they have an orchard set up, the embedded emitters are great because they can kind of go up one side of the estimated root zone and then come back the other with one big long embedded emitter line, cover that all with mulch, put it onto a timer, or plug it into your existing sprinkler riser system that you're converting to drip. So there's lots of options that they can do, but in order to specifically address exact placement on it, you really want to get to where the feeder roots are, which if the tree's 20 feet wide in terms of where its traditional drip line is, the actual roots go past that. So you really do want to look at that drip line as being sort of like a suggestion for where you really want to look at the roots. So you want a little bit in and you want some out. You don't want to just hit just the drip line.
There's the California Center for Urban Horticulture. They have two different irrigation systems for your trees. One is the RSIC, the rotary system irrigation contraption, and this isn't anything you buy. It gives you a list of parts. If you have a lot of trees, you might want to use that one because it's kind of cheap. They have one called the Trick, which is a permanent system, but the parts are gonna, if you have a lot of trees, I think the parts run you like $100 per tree, so you might not have the money to do that. But if you check, it's the UC Davis, it's the California Center for Urban Horticulture, and one is the RSIC, R-S-I-C, and the other one is Trick. And Trick is much cooler than Arsic.
Little hint though, Trick is basically just taking the same drip irrigation system that comes
Yeah.
off of the hose, and now you're putting it out there around your trees, but you're just sort of laying it down
Yeah.
as opposed to having
But
it
that-
come from the hose bit.
yeah.
But you can put this together. It sounds, like kind of scary because they give it little acronyms and things like that. It's still working with the same basic
Yeah.
tools, and we can teach you how to work with those basic tools at any of our classes. And they're all free, and you get to play with them. Okay. Yes?
Yes, my question is that a lot of nature comes onto my yard to eat the grass.
Nice.
And get the water. And I was wondering if you had recommendations of plants that maybe I could plant in the fall to make up, because if I take my grass out, I'm taking away food source for rabbits and squirrels and I just want to sort of.
That's where I lean you to go towards a meadow planting, because the reason it wasn't water or drought or anything when we took our lawn out, it was because of the rabbits. And now I have bunnies in the yard, and they're just like nature's little pruners there. And they take care of everything. I don't have dead spots or anything from them, so.
And where would we go to find out about how to create a meadow?
You can
That's it.
contact us at the Master Gardener Helpline, and we can help you. What a meadow usually is it's smaller, mostly herbaceous plants. Sometimes it's like irises and things like that. And then you can buy grass seed mixtures and with the native grass seeds, and they'll usually go dormant in the summer, but they're amazing in the spring.
If you go to the Master Gardener website too, there's classes that you can sign up for, not just drip irrigation, but that go about, how to replace your grass, how to go towards native plants, how to learn about specific trees. They've also got like things you can do with succulents, and there's an assortment of classes that are all pretty much free. Some of them have materials costs, but most of them you can go to and you can learn what you need to know to make those changes in your yard. And it's all available. And specific questions, again, send your specific questions in.
Thank you.
If you've got a weird looking leaf, a weird looking bug, take a picture of it, email it to us.
Yeah,
Okay.
send us, we like pictures. If you're gonna send pictures, if you have an issue with a problem, send us a picture of the problem, send us a picture of like the entire tree or shrub or whatever you're having, and then maybe a picture of around the base of it to help us determine what the issues are. But we answer all kinds of questions.
Yeah. Okay. The online?
Yes, this question would be probably for Jennifer. This person says there is new turf that has holes in it to allow for water to go through, a new artificial turf. Why isn't that on the rebate program?
Well, the rebate program has very specific sustainability goals. And so the program is really built around, instead of getting rid of the grass and just replacing it with something artificial or a hardscape, it's really built around, reducing heat island effects, maintaining wildlife habitat, meaning maintaining habitat for birds and bees and all of the things. And so for that reason, there are elements that are required in the program, such as a stormwater capture feature, like a dry creek bed or a rain barrel, as well as the drought-tolerant plants and so on. So really, the goal of the program is not just to save water, which artificial turf, of course, does, but it also has these added sustainability goals that artificial turf can't meet. Now, that isn't to say that you can't incorporate a small part into your overall yard redesign, but just know that that area won't be counted within the space that your rebate would be eligible for. So you're not prohibited from it, but that you're not going to get the rebate on that particular area of your yard.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. You'll just cut me off when I've too many. But you said that arborist chips are the best mulch. Is there a way of getting those chips as a retail consumer?
The library, Thousand Oaks Library has those in the parking lot.
Like help yourself or in the Thousand Oaks Library?
Yeah, there's, in the parking area between the library and Goebel.
Yeah.
The city trucks will come and they will drop.
Dump it.
Right there, and you can help yourself to it. If you know an arborist, you can also say, you know, if you want to dump it here instead of dumping
Right.
it at the dump. But be aware if they do that, it's a lot.
Yeah, no, I'll
So-
do the library.
so are rocks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, I have a system, I recently moved to a place that the system really doesn't work. It's a drip plus a riser system combined. So I called 2 fellows out to give me bids on making it a better system and drip and comply with all the new things. But you said there is a rebate for doing something like that or not? For converting I don't know what to call my system because it's got risers with drips and it doesn't work well. So I'm trying to make it one good system.
Some of the different purveyors, I know that there's some in LA, I'm not sure which ones would
Here
be
in
here.
TO.
I don't know that they have it. Some of them allow 15 cents a square foot for the drip irrigation itself. I don't believe that's for the Thousand Oaks one.
No.
But you would have to go to your particular water purveyor to see, because you can go on the bewaterwise.com and you enter where you're at and work with what your purveyor is, and it will show you what rebates are available. But I don't know that we have that here, but I do
Because
know.
somebody mentioned it. I
Well,
hadn't,
in terms of exchanging the heads of regular sprinklers, we don't have that I know of if the city of Thousand Oaks is your water purveyor, that's who you would have to go to see.
okay.
And like I said, I do know that there's some in LA where they will give you 15 cents a square
No.
foot for
Okay.
the drip
All right.
costs. But we do teach the classes for free,
So,
and it's relatively inexpensive
Yes,
to do.
but unfortunately, I'm not able any longer to do that work.
I
So
would
do you have
suggest you
lists
do
of
it
people?
Anyway, so that you can know
What's
the people
right.
that you're talking to. I've seen some horrid systems.
Well, that's what I'm concerned
Yeah.
about. They don't want to really talk about it and plan. They just say, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. And
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily conform to what I think would make more sense. And they're expensive. So,
They can be. It's good to know what it takes to do it
okay.
and whether or not they're doing it the right way. Like I said, I've done a lot of rehab work, and sometimes you just look at it and you kind of scratch your head and just cut it out and start over. And that's an awful thing to do. So by learning what it is you're hiring, you're always going to be
That's a
better
good
off. So
idea.
take the class if for no other reason, then you will now know if somebody's doing something wrong and you know to run away. So it's a good idea to learn what you're going into.
That
And I would
makes
recommend
sense.
that for any project. If you're going to have somebody replace flooring in your house, you're going to ask them questions.
Right, well, they
So-
don't like to answer them.
That's
That has been a
questionable right there.
consistent thing with a lot of contractors that
Yeah,
I-
if they won't tell you how, then I would wonder what they know.
Okay.